Last video we looked at how to create a very simple EaganMatrix program using the BiqMouth filter bank to model both a male and female solo voice. This time we'll see how to take that program and modify it to create an entire choir. Now if you think about what a choir really is, a group of singers all singing slightly out of tune and out of phase, all coming in at slightly different volumes and slightly different times with subtly different vibratos, it's actually a wonderful combination of precision and chaos. Any one voice might not necessarily be the best singer in the world, but when all voices are combined, any slight imperfections in a particular voice are masked by the ensemble. So we can ask ourselves, what if we take the solo voice we've already created and duplicate it a number of times, each slightly out of tune and out of phase with each other? Then add in some low frequency oscillation on each voice at a slightly different rate to get different vibratos and pass it through some reverb to further even out the sound. Will we simulate a choir? Well, let's see. There's actually a choir preset in the vocal category by Ed Egan that uses some of these techniques. I've created a simplified version of that from the basic BiqMouth test program we ended with last time. My version is a bit more in your face, but retains all the BiqMouth controls we had, so you can take it and easily experiment to create a wide variety of choral sounds, from realistic to surreal. I've brought up the preset that we ended with last time, our BiqMouth test program, and now we're going to modify this solo voice to become a choir. The first thing I want to do is scale my fingerboard some way so that when I'm playing on the bottom, I'm going to get the male sounds, and when I'm playing on the top, I'm going to get the female sounds. Now there are a couple different ways to do that. The simple brute force method is to simply put a switched pedal on the first barrel that we have controlling our mouth shapes, and it just so turns out the lowest mouth shape is a male ah and the highest one is the female ah. So if I set this pedal to go from my min 0 to max 127, when I engage it, I'm going to go from my low value right up to my high value, and that'll let me, using the pedal, play low for a male, and up top, where if I kept it as the male, it's not quite what I want. If I engage the female up there, that's better. So now with the pedal I can play in my lower register male and then switch and play in the upper register female. But what if I want to do it more dynamically? What if I want the fingerboard to kind of scale the male as I get higher and move into the female? How do we do that? Well, fortunately, the way that our mouth shapes are set up, there are different combinations of them that can morph from one to another. And if we take a look, we'll see that there's a female to male combination right next to each other at 2.5 female to 2.6 male. And if I scale things properly on the fingerboard, I should be able to morph between these as I move up, and then I won't have to engage that pedal. And that's what this table's really meant for. There's all these different morphing combinations that you can use to go from one sound to another. So let's think about a simple way that we can do that. There are more sophisticated things that we can do to use Y in addition to X to bring in morphing sounds. But we just want this simple, how can I go from the female to the male as I move from the male part of the fingerboard to what I want to be the female part. So we want to control the mouth shape with a formula. We'll take a free one, I. For now, we'll just add that in the plus column, that these two pluses do the same thing. We'll remove the formula we had there before. Now I, we want to start at a value of 2.6 because we know we want to go from 2.6 at the bottom male range up to 2.5 into the female range. So we'll set that to 2.6, and now we're going to have to dynamically subtract no more or around 0.1 from that to get into our female range, but I don't want to subtract it in a linear fashion. I want to start at a point where the male kind of transitions into the female. So I know I want this then to be ancillary because I need to subtract, and I'll subtract the next formula from it, J, and I know J has to be controlled by X. I don't want this to be in kilohertz. That will be values that will be wrong. I want it to be more scaled to my octaves. Then for the bottom half of X, I want to keep it 0. Because I know the male is going to go at least until the mid keyboard, and then from there female will kind of take over. And now I just kind of have to look at where this scaling's going to bring me. I'll look at my numeric display here and see what 0.06 does. Let's see. There, I'm 0 at the bottom to the mid, and now I start moving up a little bit until at the top I'm at 1, and I'm actually at 1 a little bit before. Maybe I want to scale that to come to 1 a little lower on the fingerboard than I had it. Let's see what that does. There's a female range, and I'm already at 1. And I probably wouldn't make the female voice go too much higher than that anyway. So let's keep that and see what that does. We'll bring that on to the formula that I have. And now hopefully, as I move, I'm going to stay at 2.6, and then I'm going to slowly, there I'm at 2.6, and I'm slowly now, after midpoint, taking away until I'm at 2.5 at a good female range. Now let's see how that sounds. At the bottom, male. And up top, female. Hey, that works well. I don't have to use the pedal anymore. All I needed to do was scale this a little bit, and I'm in business. Now we're ready to create the choir component. Remember, we used a wave bank as the input to the BiqMouth with that sawtooth wave, and I have in this wave bank 5 waves available to me, and I'm going to use them as the means to create my slightly detuned copies. So what I'll start with is just copy X into everything, and of course now all I've done is duplicate the solo voice I have now. It'll just come out stronger. So maybe what I want to do is, let's take this one down a bit because we're going to be putting a lot of noise in there. Let's make that 0.6 for now. Then what we can do now is think about how we're going to detune these X's. We'll use a separate formula on each one because we want to maybe dynamically control that. So what I'll do is I'll add a few cents on here or there. We want to be in kilohertz, so we want our values to be in the low thousandths. Take that. So let's just say we'll make K 0.001. We'll put K there. So we'll add a cent onto that. We'll make L 0.002. We'll make M 0.003. Well, actually, we want to put these on the duplicate voices. We'll retain our initial voice without any pitch manipulation. And finally, we'll do N on 0.004. We'll make that 4 cents off. So there we go. Let's take a look. We have our initial value that we had before, our bass pitch. The first copy, we're going to make a cent higher. The second copy, 2 cents higher. The third copy, 3. And the fourth copy, 4. So I'm going to have a lot of copies, a cent off, and that should give me a little bit of a choir sound, also with a little bit of beating because my tones are so close to each other. I should get that natural beating effect. Let's see what happens with just those changes. Hey, that sounds like a choir right off the bat. There's no vibrato or nuance, but it's still. And let's go higher. Hey, that's not bad. So that's the first thing we need to do. So what can we do to further make this a little more natural sounding? Well, let's add some motion onto the sound. It's going to be very difficult for us to add vibrato with our fingers when we're playing 3 and 4 voices on the fingerboard. So let's add a bit of that with some shape generators with some sine waves. what we want to do is we don't want to have a lot of fast vibrato here. We want very slow motion, and we want to have it different between all the voices so everything kind of blends together. What we'll do is create some shape generators at low values. So we'll start with one maybe 0.5, and we'll trigger them on gating. And maybe the next one, we don't have in even multiples. Let's make that 0.66. The next one, let's make once per second. And now maybe the next one will make 1 point, I don't know, 0.25. That's okay. And now we'll use those shape generators. We'll set them continuous because we want that vibrato to be continuous. And now we'll take these formulas and we'll set them to shape generators. And okay, shape generator 1, and I want the shape to be a sine wave. Remember, this is bipolar, so now we're going to be going above and beneath our value to give us even more natural vibrato effect. And the next one, we'll do the same thing, but on shape generator 2. We'll set that to sine wave. And you know what? Let's set the phase a little bit off on this one. So we'll set that to 90 degrees phase. For the next one, we want shape generator 3, and let's set the phase on that one 2.5, and the next one we're going to set to shape generator 4, and we'll set the phase to 270 on that. All right, what does that do for us? It should give us a little more motion and natural sound. And up top. Now, I'm playing all these notes together, and it's difficult to be exactly in tune on the fingerboard, especially when I've got all this motion going on. So the next thing we want to do is add some rounding to this. Maybe about there is going to be about right. It'll make things sound more in tune and also be easier to play. And as a chorus, I don't really care. So I think we can also use a little more reverb on this, and maybe some offset. We have two offsets here, one for a recirculator dial, and we'll choose R4 that it's set to, and another one for the offset on the mix, and we'll keep that there. And we'll create a little formula that will just add a little bit of this on it, maybe 0.15 as we press harder, and let's make that V and V, and let's see what that does to the sound. I hear a little bit of ringing in there, and I think something we might add is a low-pass filter. So let's add a low-pass filter, and instead of sending the outputs of our BiqMouth directly to mains, we're going to send them into this low-pass filter. We'll set the cutoff of that at, I don't know, something like, let's set it at maybe 6 kilohertz with a bandwidth of 1, and we'll send that to the output on 5, and let's see if that gives us any subtle change. I think it does a little bit, and you can play with that, and even maybe a little bit with the bandwidth as well. Now, the only other thing we might want to do here is, as you recall, this bandwidth multiplier doesn't change the sound that much. So instead of putting a formula on that, we'll use that to give a little nuance, a little change in the tonal color, and we'll put a formula on there of O, and we just want a little bit of this. We don't want the bandwidth to be too low, so let's say go from 0.8 to 1, and we'll just change that on Y. It'll be almost imperceptible, but a little more change, a little more dynamic motion. I think we don't have to do too much more here. I think this gives you a good idea on how to create your own choir and start adding to it. And I really recommend that you go and look at the choir preset in the vocal category to see how Ed Egan handled this problem with a lot more depth and nuance than I do here. But I think this gives you a very good idea of the kind of things you have to do to create this choir effect.